So, hi, welcome. My name is Rebecca Eigen. I am an astrologer and relationship alchemist in Houston, Texas. And I am the author of the Shadow Dance and Astrological Seventh House Workbook, which is based on both Jungian psychology and astrology's seventh house, which is the marriage house. And the first thing I want to talk about today is I want to define what Jung called a neurosis. A neurosis is not something for us to be afraid of, as we are all neurotic in some form or fashion. And these are parts of us that are split off, that we cannot tolerate in consciousness as belonging to us. Jung said neurosis is only a suffering that has not yet found its meaning. So if we are not gratified, stimulated, and approved of in our earliest experiences, our real self will form an inferiority complex, which is called the shadow. And this is because there's nobody alive who does not have a shadow, because we are all human beings and our parents were perfectly imperfect. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. We all have these places in us that are hidden from us. And these places in us are painful. They're too painful for us to look at. So there are several ego defenses that we will use, which are repression, suppression, and denial. So first of all, suppression is we have never allowed that into consciousness. It's painful feelings that we felt, that we may have been told we cannot allow ourselves to feel that way. We cannot allow ourselves to think that way. We are told that's wrong. And so we completely suppress it. It's like, I'm not like that. And for instance, you could have somebody who is very angry, and when you're around them, their spouse is the one that is acting out all the anger. But if you're around that person for a while, you can start to hear all the anger that is coming out of them as well, but they have completely suppressed that because they're not allowed to feel their own anger. Maybe they have been told that anger was, not allowed in this family. Only our father or mother can be angry, and they will not admit it to themselves how angry they are. So they keep attracting angry people or partners, and it will keep repeating. And a lot of things get suppressed that are emotional, that are instinctual, that are natural to us. Things that we were told about ourselves, and we decided, well, we can't be like that because they won't like us. And so we suppress it. So it never got into consciousness to begin with. And the next one is repression. And repression is that something may have happened to us, and it was conscious at one time, but it was so painful that we don't want to remember it. We completely repress certain situations and events that have happened to us that brought up a lot of feeling and distraught feelings for us. Maybe we may have known that our father could have been sneaking into our bedroom at night, and it was so painful to us that we didn't want to know about it. We don't want to feel the feelings that we felt, so we repressed it completely. So repression is something emotional that happened to us. And the third one is denial, which is something is happening in our environment and it is undeniable. It's obvious, everyone can see it, it's clear to everyone, but we deny it. But for whatever reason, we refuse to see it and acknowledge it. And there are clues everywhere. Even our dreams will present us with information about what we are in denial about. For instance, we may have a partner who is drinking too much, and we deny it. Or a spouse who is cheating, or a partner who is cheating on us, and we know it. We know it, but we don't want to see it. There are clues everywhere. Even our dreams will tell us the exact person they're cheating with, which is really interesting. And we will say, no, it's not happening. And we'll go into denial because we do not want to face the fact that our life is going to change if we see it. So we deny it. We will say to ourselves, oh, he's not drinking too much. He's just depressed right now. He'll get over it. Or she's not cheating on me. We make excuses for their behavior and we live with the denial. Um, so we make excuses. We make excuses for whatever is happening and we do not allow ourselves to clearly accept the truth about what's happening. And that is called denial. And we all have these defenses because they helped us survive. We needed them to survive. But to move forward with ease, we have to face ourselves clearly, which takes work. And I believe it takes shadow work. That's why the prerequisite for doing shadow work is self-esteem, self-worth, and self-compassion. And I'm talking about every one of us. Every one of us needs to develop more self-esteem all the time. And we have to do what Jungians call ego development, or psychologists call ego development. And if we cannot look at our shadow, we have to work on building up our ego strength first. Because when we see something in somebody else, it's like we are projecting onto them or whatever. We're in denial or we're having our ego defenses, but it's like being in the mouth of a lion. You cannot see the lion because you're in it. And so the first thing that everybody has to do before they do any shadow work at all is to build their ego strength. And going into our own unconscious is what, by definition, it's not conscious. So going into our unconscious is what shadow work is about. And when we see a shadow quality in another person, it will be repulsive. I mean, it will be. Or the exact opposite. We will be fascinated with that person. So it's too high or too low, because it's an emotional effect that what the shadow is bringing up. And when we project negative shadow qualities, we'll wonder, why is this happening? But actually, really, at first, we don't even know it's happening. We don't even know it's repeating until we've seen it 1 or 2 or 3 times. And then we go, wait a minute, I'm the common denominator. I'm the common denominator here. And that's when we can begin to do the process work of going into our shadow, going into our own self and looking at our patterns. And this is happening to all of us. This is an archetypal experience. So it is a task for every one of us in order to develop consciousness. So doing this kind of self-reflection is what I call shadow work, and it's what Jungians say. One of my favorite authors is Edie Edinger, who's written numerous books, and he's not only a Jungian analyst, he's a psychiatrist, or he's a deceased, but he said, this is exceedingly difficult because these are not pleasant things. When we're projecting negative shadow qualities, they're unwanted, they're objectionable, they're inferior, they're suppressed aspects of our being that we are absolutely not aware of. And so taking some of those back is an ongoing and lifelong retrieval process. And some people hear this concept and they're very glib about it and will say, I know my shadow. Well, no, you don't. Nobody knows their entire shadow, or you'd be gone. You would ascend. I mean, I believe that. You would actually leave the planet, and not that everybody that leaves the planet has figured that out, but if you're still here on the planet, you're still working on yourself. You're still doing consciousness work. And I assure you, this is deep work, and you will be changed completely when you really learn to own your own shadow. So today I have a very interesting case history that I can share, and I have her permission. And I have actually shared it once before, but not on my presentations. I've shared it when I was speaking with a friend who's also teaching shadow work. But I want to share it as part of my teaching too, because it was so, to me, it was one of the most fabulous descriptions of integrating shadow. So this person told me that her first husband would occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally, he would snap and beat the crap out of her. I mean, he would get so enraged that he couldn't stop. So it was actually severe. And she said, time went on and she left him. Eventually she left him. And she married another man. And he was a Gestalt therapist. And she studied Jungian psychology. She became an astrologer herself. She did a lot of inner work and started meditating. And she said when she was living in Oregon, because she was living in Oregon, she would meditate and she would put her first husband in a bubble, in a pink bubble, because that's the metaphysical way of releasing, right? It's like you put that person in a pink bubble and you let it go. And she said, and I would go in meditation and I would release him and I would cut the cords and the whole bit. And then I would come out of meditation and I would think, but that son of a bitch, I can't forgive him. I mean, that was the emotion she still felt. As time went on, she left that husband and she got divorced again, was living on the West Coast, and she decided, I think I want to be alone. I just want to be alone. I don't want to have a relationship. I want to study my own patterns and whatever I want to study, and I'm just going to be by myself. And she said time went on, and after that, she realized, I really do miss not having a partner, and I would like someone to reflect back to me, to mirror to me the places where I'm stuck. And I felt like, these are just a few places where I'm stuck and I need a mirror to help me do this. And she couldn't get a hold of certain things she felt. So then she married again. And she thought, really thought this at the beginning, that it was just little bitty pieces. That's how she described it. Just some little bitty pieces about me that I needed to help, that I needed some work on. Well, when she married her third husband, she said he is OCD. And when I would do something that he disapproved of, he would bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch at me. And she said, I found myself after about a year coming up with rage. And I was just filled with it. And I realized that if I was big enough and strong enough to beat a 6'2" man down, I would have beaten him to a pulp. And as I had that feeling and acknowledgement of the rage that I was feeling, I suddenly went, oh my God. That was what I had done to my first husband, probably my second one as well. I would bitch and bitch and bitch at him. I was unaccepting of him as he was. I didn't like who he was. And I was going to change him. And I realized that that was exactly what I did to him. And he couldn't take it anymore. And the man would snap and he would be overcome with rage. She said, when I actually saw my own behavior and my own feelings towards that behavior in myself, I was able to connect the dots and forgive him and forgive herself. This is one of the most powerful stories ever shared with me because she got it, and so many people go from person to person to person. I mean, we've all done that. I remember doing a lot of that myself. I'm 67 now, so I started doing this in 1990. That's a long time ago. So this is a way of being and a way of life for me now. But when things are repeating and you're going through it, you don't really realize it at first until you have seen it 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's that hard to get a grip on and then admit it. Then admit it to yourself that this is something about me and that I do. And so she said he was still alive at the time. And she called him and she said, I am very, very sorry. And she told him the truth about what she had experienced in her next two marriages. And she said, "Please forgive me, and I'm very sorry." And so this was able to complete this process. Once you can go through this, you actually can feel it. You can feel it in your body. I mean, I know a man who attracts to himself and sees everyone as extremely aggressive. He cannot see that he is too. His friends can see it. I mean, we all accept him for who he is because, of course, that's not all he is. And that's an important part of shadow work. That's only one part. You know, when you uncover a part like that, that is absolutely reprehensible to you, keep that in mind. It is only one part of you. And we can't change anything that we can't accept about ourselves, or to come into balance with. Not that rage is what we want to do, but learning to get angry when it's appropriate is actually very healthy. It's healthy for all of us to learn to experience all of our feelings. So, um, I really commended her because she actually thought to herself, "I need a mirror. I need somebody to reflect off of me." And Carl Jung says that the unrelated human being lacks wholeness because we cannot become conscious of certain things until we are in relationships. And this again is not just this is not just about marriage partners. This can be bosses, this can be friends, this can be siblings, this can be children, this can be neighbors for that matter. So, relating to other people is the only way that we get to see them and us. And other people will do this to you. They can't stand you. They will avoid you. They will walk away from you. They will try to not have anything to do with you. Well, that's their shadow. And so you can be unhooked from, um, just unhooked from the emotion about it because you know that they don't know your whole being. They know that they're seeing one part, and maybe you are that part. Maybe you're doing that, and they don't like it about themselves. So I want to read from this book, and I went ahead and typed it out because it's really small. So I thought, well, I'll type it out large for myself to read. But it's called Psychology and Religion, East and West, and it is volume 11 of the collected works by Carl Jung. And this particular chapter is called Psychotherapy or the Clergy. And Alan Watts actually did a fantastic talk about the shadow on his on YouTube. You can actually Google it and hear Alan Watts talking about this. And he's talking about this is a quote directly from Jung. It is a human quality, a kind of deep respect for the facts, for the man who suffers from them, and for the riddle of such a man's life. The truly religious person has this attitude. He knows that God has brought all sorts of strange and inconceivable things to pass and seeks in the most curious ways to enter a man's heart. He therefore senses in everything the unseen presence of the divine will. This is what I mean by unprejudiced objectivity. It is a moral achievement on the part of the doctor, the psychiatrist, who ought not to let himself be repelled by sickness and corruption, because we cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. I am the oppressor of the person I condemn, not his friend and fellow sufferer. I do not in the least mean to say that we must never pass judgment when we desire to help or improve, but if the doctor wishes to help a human being, he must be able to accept him as he is. And he can only do this in reality when he's already seen and accepted himself as he is. Perhaps this sounds very simple, but simple things are always the most difficult. In actual life, it requires the greatest art to be simple. And so acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the acid test of one's whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do Unto the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them, the poorest of all beggars, the most impudent of all offenders, yeah, the very fiend himself, that these are within me, and that I myself have to stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved? What then? People forget that doctors have moral scruples and that certain patients' confessions are even hard for the doctor to swallow. Yet the patient does not feel himself accepted unless the very worst in himself is accepted too. No one can bring this about by mere words. It comes only through reflection and through the doctor's attitude towards himself and his own dark side. And you can put yourself in the word doctor and just say your own attitude towards your own dark side, because I guarantee you that things will come up. You'll get in new relationships, new people will come into your life, things will happen, and you'll get to see another piece that you have not forgiven yourself for, that you have not forgiven that person for, or whatever, like she had to go through. And the other thing he says is, let's see, there was some more. It is only when you have seen and accepted your own capacity for fear, shame, and judgment that you can truly see the other for what he or she is. Without this acceptance, we avoid parts of the other simply because we are reminded of these in ourselves, and thus no true connection nor genuine compassion can arise. Jung understood this deeply, and this is why Alan Watts said, Jung was the sort of man who could feel anxious and afraid and guilty without being ashamed of feeling that way. In other words, he understood that an integrated person is not a person who has simply eliminated the sense of guilt or the sense of anxiety from his life, who is fearless and wooden and a kind of sage of stone. He is a person who feels all these things, but he has no recriminations against himself for feeling them. What happens in the psyche when we act as if some parts of us aren't really ours? When we search for external reasons why we behave the way we do? When we want to hide certain parts from all the eyes of the world, including our own? And according to Jung, we end up with a personality that is split, or a more fitting term is unwhole. Jung writes, neurosis is an inner cleavage, the state of being at war with oneself. Everything that accentuates this cleavage makes the patient worse, and everything that mitigates it tends to heal him. What drives people to be at war with themselves is the suspicion or the knowledge that they consist of two persons in opposition to one another. The conflict may be between the sensual and the spiritual man, and these are both parts of each person, or between our ego and our shadow. It is what Faust means when he says, two souls, alas, dwell in my breast apart. A neurosis is a splitting of the personality. And to heal a split in a person, we have to learn to look at our shadow and look at uncomfortable truths about ourselves in the process. Because our inner war is softened when we allow ourselves to be seen, and not just the side of ourselves that matches our inner subjective ideal. That part is easy. No, we show those feathers prominently. No, we need to accept our failures and our shortcomings too. And Jung concludes, no doubt this all sounds very simple. In reality, it is very hard. Consider for a moment what it means to grant the existence to what is unreasonable, senseless, or evil. It is only when you have seen and accepted your own capacities for all of that that you will begin to integrate your shadow or work with your shadow in a way that will be helpful to yourself and to the people who are in your life. And the universe will continually to bring new people. The universe will bring you new people and new adventures and new experiences for you to see those missing parts, those split off parts. You know, I think I saw another part of me. Actually, I've been aware of it for some time, my dogmatism, because I can be like, I know about this, I know about this, I know about this, and I'm not open to other things, like what I consider to be airy-fairy. So the idealistic person in me became more realistic, and I'm still having to balance the cynic and the realist with the idealist that is going on inside of me. And that was something that was in my psychological horoscope analysis report, which started the whole process. So it's like you're constantly still uncovering the layers and the different levels of going into your wholeness. And wholeness is the goal, but it is not achievable. I mean, that's another thing about shadow work. It is the goal, but it is not achievable. And how I look at it now is that it is a way of just being in the world. So if somebody comes into your energy field and you do not like them, get to know them. Get to know that person. Spend some quality time with them. Ask them questions. Find out who they really are. Up your level of curiosity of why that person maybe pushed your buttons and why you've pushed that person away and now want to have nothing to do with them. There's something there. And trust me, after this many years of learning about all this, I just think it's phenomenal. I think it's phenomenal. And I think, as the Taoists say, that we have to be in awe. We have to be in awe because if we're not in awe, we're inviting disaster. And that is my talk for today. So the acceptance of ourself, the essence of our whole self, is what this work is about. It's about having compassion for ourselves. And so I'm going to go to Facebook and see if anyone has come in and has any comments or questions. Thank you. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining me. Well, it doesn't look like there are any questions, but that doesn't, I know that a lot of people are coming later because I'm doing this at 12 noon. I just thought it was a good time. Maybe people would be at lunch at least in Central Standard Time. And if not, that they could tune in and watch it later. So thank you for joining me if you came, and thank you if you come to my channel. I appreciate it. Please like this and share it if you found value in it. And have a great weekend. I'll see you all next Friday. And one more time, my website is shadowdance.com.